Today, I want to discuss a video that I recently found. Like my previous video, this video will cover an aspect of the relationship between science and religion. In fact, this time the question that will be answered will be, can religion replace science? In this video, I will define religion as Messianic Judaism. Let's get down to business.
While science is constantly replacing religion with better explanations about how our world and the universe works,
I find these types of claims to be quite irritating. As I said in my previous video, science is not a truth-finding method. Throughout the history of science, numerous previously accepted theories and hypotheses have been replaced by other theories and hypotheses. The only thing that science replaces is science. The history of science shows this. There is no mechanism in place in an experiment that can discern a natural cause from a supernatural cause, nor is there a mechanism in place that can determine if there is any cause for the effect at all. The cause of the effect is only assumed for the sake of making the scientific method functional. Allow me to give an example. Here I have a book called A Christian View of Men and Things by Dr. Gordon Clark, who is my favorite Christian philosopher. And page 140 of this book, Clark writes, "How science can be useful, though false, is illustrated in a delightful textbook on inductive logic. Milk fever," the illustration goes, "until late in the 19th century, was a disease frequently fatal to cows. A veterinarian proposed the theory that it was caused by a bacteria in the cow's udder. The cure, therefore, was to disinfect the cow, which the veterinarian proceeded to do by injecting Lugol solution in each teat. The mortality under this treatment fell from a previous 90% to 30%. Does not this successful treatment prove that the bacteria were killed and that Lugol cured the disease? Unfortunately, another veterinarian was caught without the Lugol solution one day, and he injected plain boiled water. The cow recovered. Had water killed the bacteria? What is worse? It was found later that air could be pumped into the cow's udders with equally beneficial results. The original science was wrong, but it cured the cows nonetheless." Now, the logic textbook that Clark references is Reliable Knowledge by Harold A. Larrabee. I do want to go a bit further into Clark's book, so that the point that has already been made will be made even clearer. A closer examination of the logic of verification should be made. In the example above, the veterinarian probably argued if bacteria causes milk fever, Lugol solution will cure. The disinfectant does cure it. Therefore, I have verified a hypothesis that bacteria causes milk fever. This argument, as would be explained in a course on deductive logic, is a fallacy. Its invalidity may be perhaps more clearly seen in an artificial example. If a student doggedly works through Plato's Republic in Greek, he will know the Greek language. This student knows Greek, therefore he has read Plato's Republic. This is the fallacy of asserting the consequent, and it is invalid whenever used. But it's precisely this fallacy that is used in every case of scientific verification. If the law of gravitation is true, a freely falling body will have a constant acceleration, and the eclipse will begin at 2:58 and 3 seconds p.m. But freely falling bodies do have a constant acceleration, and the eclipse did begin at 2:58 and 3 seconds p.m. Therefore, the law of gravitation is true. Or, if the periodic table of atomic weights is true, a new element of such and such a weight must exist. This new element has now been discovered. Therefore, the periodic table is verified. And if I eat roast turkey and plum pudding, I lose my appetite. I have lost my appetite. Therefore, we have roast turkey for dinner. All these arguments are equally invalid, but sometimes there is an adverse reaction if it is claimed that verification never proves the truth of a scientific law. Is it worse to attack science or to murder logic? Logic is defined as the science of necessary inference. Here, the point that has been made is that there is not a mechanism in place that can demonstrate what cause, if any, caused the observed effect. Because of this, it is not possible for science to definitively replace religious explanations. To argue otherwise would disregard logic, but since scientific explanations assume the law of contradiction, science would be inoperable without the law of contradiction. Therefore, if the atheist insists that science can replace religion, the atheist is rejecting logic, and science dies along with it.
Religion never seems to be able to replace science with better explanations about, well, anything. A perfect example of this is how science is still making discoveries about how our universe began.
Linda is arguing that religion cannot replace science with a better explanation for any occurrence. The question is, who is determining which explanation is better? If it is left up to Linda, who has publicly dismissed the Bible as a fairy tale numerous times, it is readily apparent that Linda is ruling out religious explanations a priori. Therefore, it is not hard to see that she is predisposed to favor scientific explanations over religious ones. Because of this, Linda's arguments against religious explanations will inevitably start with the presumption that religious explanations will be inferior to scientific explanations. Now, I would like to offer an example of occurrences that are better explained by the truth of the Bible than by science. These events were predicted by the Bible prior to their occurrence. Now, these are only 3 examples of many. I will also give 2 reasons why the religious explanation for these occurrences is superior to a scientific explanation. One reason why these explanations are better is because part of the Bible's revelation to us is historical. Thus, the Bible is more relevant to historical events than science is. The scientific method, although it does have similarities to the historical method, is not able to explain why these 3 events occurred as well as the Bible can. Here are 3 examples. 1. Jerusalem and the temple would be destroyed, not long after Messiah Yeshua's earthly ministry was finished. 2. The one who would allow Jewish exiles to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple and the city of Jerusalem would be named Cyrus, who is known in history as Cyrus the Great. Number 3. The destruction of Tyre and its being thrown into the sea and its former location would be scraped like a rock. The second reason why the truth of the Bible is a better explanation for these events than science is because the form of the argument for these examples are valid. Now, before we get to the valid forms of the biblical arguments, let's briefly revisit the problem with using the scientific method to try and prove the truth of propositions. When conducting an experiment with the scientific method in an effort to confirm a hypothesis, you must always reason from the consequent to the antecedent. As I pointed out earlier in this video, this is a fallacy known as asserting the consequent. An easy way to identify this fallacy is to watch for an effect to cause argument. In contrast, when we appeal to the Bible's revelation, we are given the cause for these effects before the effects occur. This is because the Bible was written prior to the prophetic events that I cited in my 3 examples. Therefore, we can make our argument for these 3 examples in a logically valid modus ponens syllogism. That is to say, we can argue from cause to effect, which is a valid inference in logic. Because of the form of the argument and the Bible's closer relevance to history than the scientific method, it is not at all difficult to argue that revelation from the Bible works better to explain the events cited in these 3 examples than the scientific method does.
A new model that applies quantum correction terms to complement Einstein's theory of relativity. Basically, practically meaning that our universe may have existed forever. Whereas much of traditional religions still cling to their creation stories in spite of all of the incredible evidence that comes their way, and still has the same lazy answers to any questions that might threaten their point of view.
Well, this is ironic. Linda claims that we are clinging to our creation story, but are we really the ones who are doing the clinging? In a paper that was published in April of 2016 titled Perturbative Instability of Cosmology from Quantum Potential, the researchers write, apart from its debatable correctness, we examined the perturbative stability of the recently proposed cosmology from quantum potential. We find that the proposed quantum corrections invoke additional parameters which apparently introduce perturbative instability to the universe. This means the universe could not be eternal. It seems that Linda and her atheist friends are the ones who are clinging to their fairy
It
tales.
was God, or it's Allah, or the now classic catch-all explanation made famous by Mr. Ken Ham, ensuring that you never have to do any scientific research or even think for yourself, which is, well, there's a book for that.
It looks like Linda cannot win. In 2012, a paper was published called Did the Universe Have a Beginning by Alexander Vilenkin and Audrey Matheny. They conclude after reviewing multiple scenarios that the universe could not exist forever. This means that even if the case for quantum correction, being able to account for a universe that is eternal, were stronger, even that piece of information would be subject to change. This means that Linda can never know if her scientific explanations can truly replace what she might call religious explanations. It seems that she is as guilty of being at least as dogmatic in her position as Ken Ham is in his position.
Science has helped us understand that all human life is important, and to be bigoted against someone based on their skin colour, sex, or sexual orientation is just not okay.
What Linda is saying is ludicrous. Isn't science supposed to have results that are measurable? What does morality feel or taste like? By bringing science into a realm where it was not meant to operate, Linda is basically molesting and enslaving science to prove a position that it was never meant to investigate in the first place.
Whereas with most major religions, if you are not racist, sexist, homophobic, or bigoted, then you can't really say that you are truly following the word of your God.
I am not concerned with what other religions say. I will say that Messianic Judaism teaches us to love others as we do ourselves, and to love even our enemies. However, we are to hate sin. Just because we do not like what someone is doing does not mean that we are bigoted toward them. I suppose that if Linda had a problem with my preference for ice cream, she would, by her own logic, be bigoted towards white, straight, religious males. Shame on you, Linda.
With science and its associated technologies, it's becoming more and more like and surpassing the futuristic worlds depicted in science fiction. Whereas religion is like some sad, dated person who will only wear the clothes that were popular when they were young. Basically, religion is like someone who is stuck in the 1990s, who's still using dial-up, still calling people from their home phone, and still wearing MC Hammer pants, telling anyone who disagrees with them that you can't touch this, while desperately dancing from side to side in a futile attempt to escape having to make any changes to their incredibly flawed worldview.
Well, that was incredibly painful to listen to. As you can see, it seems that Linda is guilty of many other things she is accusing believers of doing. This is certainly not atypical of the atheists who fancy spending their time shaking their fists at what they might call invisible sky fairies. And feel free to check out my book, Apologetics Made Simple. It gives you 5 keys for building an apologetic methodology that cannot be meaningfully countered. I hope this video was a blessing to you. Shalom.